Haven't heard from Kim. Haven't heard from Kim.
Not. Well,
All right. Tēnā koutou katoa. Would you like to join me with our opening karakia? Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau kia mā kina kina ki ta, kia mā tara tara ki tā, kia kia te atakura, ki tio, ki wuna, ki wuna, ki hei mohu leo. Thank you, everyone. We have apologies for lateness from Councillor Johansson. Do you have any other apologies? Yeah, no apologies. And so today we have, for those people who are watching at home, we have information session workshop items. We have Queen Elizabeth II Park, which of course everybody calls it that, QE2 update, and then we have a pre-project briefing for the organics processing plant site redevelopment, and an update with the police. So first, the QE2 update, we've got Megan and Barbara here, and Bridie online. If you'd like to join us at the end of the table, you're welcome to move those names.
what should I do? I'm someone. Yeah, I'll put them here.
So yeah, just to be in your hands if you want to give us your briefing and then take questions, or just pause and give me a look when you're okay to take questions.
I did this one, don't I?
Yep.
Let's just go through and then take questions at the end.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we've got.
Shouldn't take too long, but the questions might take longer. So
Yeah, guaranteed. Yeah, so we have just under half an hour.
wonderful. Okay, so obviously Barbara and I are here today to talk about the QE2 park. Just a bit of an update of where we're at. There's been a few requests for information, so it's about time that we probably came and had a discussion with you. Oh.
Which track it's on like the side?
Oh yeah, possibly that one. This is on.
Right.
There you
So
go.
try clicking now.
That's that one.
Okay, I'll just do it. Just no.
So yeah, a little bit of why we're here. So we're just going to give you an update of where we are with implementing the QE2 master plan that was developed in 2019. We just kind of want to say what projects we've completed and what our next priorities are. And that there was a big project in 2019 that involved the sale of the land to Shirley Boys and Avonside Girls, which ring-fenced some funding for council, and there's also additional funding in the plan. So the plan was developed in consultation with the community and following a hearing was approved by council. If you just want to go to the next one. This is kind of what the plan is, and I've just tried to simplify what we're doing and where we're at. And it's not exactly the right shapes, it's just me and PDF trying to figure stuff out. But the blue square or rectangle is land that's been set aside for our current lease. So that was advertised, a person was selected, and there's currently ongoing discussions, but they have been given a deadline of the 31st of May. So we're hoping that we hear back from them then about whether that lease progresses or that if it doesn't. So we've tried to stay away from working on that southern portion of the reserve for now, just due to that reason. You can obviously see there's a multi-sports field, a car park and a sports pavilion in that area. So it's kind of pausing those projects too, because we don't want to kind of start investing in those big ticket items to then know that we've got more space or less space. So that's just where we're at with that portion. So in the last 12 months, we've focused our development on that yellow square rectangle, and I can show you more about that on the next slide. So the ones that have been completed as per the master plan, obviously the Christchurch School of Gymnastics was rebuilt quite early on. There was a car park right beside beside the School of Gymnastics and the existing sports field that was done. Obviously QE2 pool and recreation centre and car park was one of the early ticket items too. We redeveloped the fitness trail. And the northern end of the reserve, a disc golf course has been developed. That's been an external cost by Canterbury Disc Golf Association. And we've started to work on some of the internal path network in that northern portion, which I'll show you on the next slide. We've done some perimeter fencing enhancements as well as some entrance enhancements. And we're looking at doing some signage and that's kind of wayfinding signage going forward, just to make it a bit clearer of where you are and where to go to. And there is an approved tree plan in the master plan, and that's going to be managed now by the urban forestry planting program. They did note to me that the tree condition report system is slightly different, so that might mean that some of the trees that were indicated as poor might be in fair condition, which means they can stay. So they're going to start implementing some of the planting in that northern portion of the reserve this winter. Next slide. Oh,
I'll go too fast.
and this is kind of like highlighting, and sorry, again, it's me just quickly sketching on the master plan. The blue paths are the ones that are getting developed right now or have been developed. They're kind of in the middle of the, I suppose, the contract of works. I've highlighted that purple line and it's an approximate line, but there's a really strong desire line in the park at the moment. And our understanding is it's the school kids taking a shortcut to get to school. So a way that we've thought that might mitigate that is you can see the yellow line that's going through the play space. We've thought if the school kids could get directed to join onto that blue path, then that's kind of a straight route. And one of the things that we might do in that portion is, and this is probably a bit that we're going to talk to you about now, is rejig that play space a little bit to allow for that desire line to be removed, because there has been some noted accidents from sports users in that area. And if you go to the next slide, I think there might be a picture. Yeah, that's a desire line there. And we have tried to re-turf it and look at measures to stop people using it, but it's not. So I think the more effective way would be to make the simplest route through the park for the kids to go down, and it'll connect, instead of going through there, it'll connect to this path just here. And that left-hand picture is an image of one of the, and I suppose this is a secondary kind of path that's been more done in the natural field versus asphalt. So that's what we've got to as of today. If you go to the next slide, please, Cindy. As I just mentioned, that path is, and this is again just me drawing a line on a map, so it's got to be a bit of landscape architecture and design that's got to go into the actual configuration of that path. But our thoughts are if you can kind of direct that route straight through, and we think about the best layout for that play space, that's what our next step will be. So a couple of things to bear in mind about the play space, because it went through that master plan process, we're trying our best to keep in line with what items are currently in there. Just due to changes in costs and things like that, we're looking to potentially change the big piece item, which is number 9, but it's not necessarily about what it costs, it's what we've heard about that feature from other councils and it not being easy to maintain. And obviously we'll do that in consultation with the community, and would share something with the board when we've got to that level of detail. We're going to work in with doing the basketball court at the same time, as well as a park toilet, because while we're managing the stuff in the southern end, there's currently no toilet other than what's at the gymnastics school or at QE2 pool. So it's a priority for us if we're going to put in a play space to put a toilet in here. We're going to look at adding in that basketball court as well, and I suppose the pro of having the separation of space means that we could maybe direct one side of the play space to more older children and youth and have the younger children in another part of the space, which is what we've heard a lot from in previous engagements. We'll figure out that path realignment and start obviously continuing on with that urban tree plan implementation. We do have budget set aside to do this, and Barbara's a project manager, so she'll start working on that turbo crescent. I'm just making sure I've passed everything on. Oh, and obviously we'll generally try to keep the same theme and equipment, and have said that we'll work with you and the community on that. And then the next one, and I'm happy to go back to these slides to help with answering specific questions. Once we've have a bit more understanding of that lease area, then we can progress with some of those other things. So that's a multi-sports field, the sports changing facility and toilet, a car parking that's associated around that aspect of the plan. Any stormwater requirements, because we're thinking that no matter what developments we do are going to have an associated requirement for stormwater. And in the middle of the landscape plan or the master plan, there's space for a grass training field and event space. So we could also look to develop that. And we'll continue to align those works with the implementation of the tree plan and the signage. We have reached out to the school already about the multi-sports field development, and we're just going to have some initial discussions with them, but we'll move forward with those discussions once we know more about the lease. There is enough budget to deliver all of these items, and the AstroTurf will come out of the sports field network plan. Do you have anything that you want to add?
No, said it all.
Yeah, that's about it, I think.
Cool. So we had Alex, Celeste, Joe, Yanni.
Keep it to 3 and then we can do another loop. Look,
Well, you see the precedent then. That means
Yeah.
everybody else has to do the same.
the first question I have is, obviously this was meant to be in the first financial year following the 2019 master plan. What assurances can we actually give to our community and residents that there is a play space coming and that there is all these awesome changes coming, because it's been 6 years since it was developed and we, to be quite frank, have seen footpaths and some planning work as well. So is there actually any time frame at the moment on delivering these spaces? Because for 6 years to not have that, it is concerning for our residents.
Yeah, I think right now we've got staff capacity, which is probably the big difference in ability. Yeah.
Okay, so is there any timeframes yet for this?
I think that sits with you, and we're kind of we're in the middle of figuring that out, but I think it's probably worthwhile for us to share those with you when we know.
Okay, perfect. The second question is, obviously as a student, I definitely walks down that
The desire line.
every day, so I can confirm that is true. I guess the question around the grass training field and event space, I've spoken to a few event promoters who have obviously been doing quite a lot of work in that space, but from what I hear from residents, generally really supportive of that and bringing events to the east. What impacts will that have on the space to do those events? Will they still have the capacity to deliver 5,000 to 10,000 packs events?
Yeah, so I'm assuming that when that plan was developed, that size was sufficient, but we can talk to our events team who work with those event planners and just make sure that it does.
So there is room, I guess, to adapt that a little bit to make sure we are being flexible for those event teams coming in.
I think there are some consent conditions around how many events and stuff that they can have. So that's something that those events providers and the council events teams would have to coordinate.
Wonderful, because the last thing I want is seeing them cut off during this. And then my last.
Our events team have made it very clear that they appreciate that space.
Perfect. And then my last question for now, obviously with Thompson Park, the community was quite concerned about the consultation with them. I understand that was because it was an emergency renewal, but going forward, knowing that this is going to happen, I know you've said that we will loop in with the community, but is that going to be through consultation or is it just going to be updates, or how can we make sure that the community has been fully looped in on this process so we don't see what happened last time happening again?
Yes, we will do proper consultation, and as you said, Thompson Park was out of the one play item renewal, so it wasn't of this scale anyway. We would never go away without consulting with the community on this. So the idea is that we take what's in the master plan right now, but what Megan was saying, like the costs have actually changed. So we were checking in the background, like what can we actually deliver with the budget that we have, and just sense checking that. And at the moment, considering different procurement options to give us the best benefits for the budget that we have. And once we have a clear way forward, that's when we're going to start going back to the community and figuring out what's the best way forward.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, Celeste.
Thank you. Very interesting and good to hear that there's capacity now to keep going forward, and that I'm sure we'll get more information about the timelines, but I know that the thing is to see what that will look like. We've had a chance to share that. Couple of things. One is around the Astro, the water sports fields. In terms of like similar with the playgrounds, but can we make sure that we engage early and often with some of the key stakeholders, which would be the schools and some of the clubs that will be using that space?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, we've already
Yeah.
contacted the school. Because I know there's been interest from the board about a discussion about them, about how we can make the most of the space and shared use. But yeah, the team that delivers those projects will start quite early with engaging with key stakeholders.
And similarly, can we get a sort of a timeline when that becomes more apparent? And so we've got the lease.
Yeah, I think once we've got the lease, yes or no, whether it's going forward or not, we can probably sit down as a wider team and figure out some timeframes.
And probably, you know, sometimes even giving an update, even if there isn't an update, is still a useful update. So
Yeah,
are we able to sort of beyond the school? I'm thinking of the sports clubs that previously reached out to us and we said we'll give you an update around about now. This itself will be really interesting.
Yeah.
So well, I might be able to share the slide if it's public.
Yeah,
It's public,
yeah.
but if there's anything else we can share, and maybe I'll send through their contacts, because you know who we consider some of these
Yeah.
other
no,
stakeholders.
I think the
Yeah.
engagement team would be really happy to
Right.
know that.
And then just sort of final question.
Are you sure?
Trying to bundle them all into one, is around the paths. Is there any capacity for those paths to be a bit wider to sort of future proof them, because, you know,
They
in
are
terms of-
pretty wide.
are they, how big are they? Well, are they?
Three.
They're pretty wide.
Oh, they
Yeah,
are,
3
brilliant.
meters.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Well, don't nail me down on this. I think, I believe most of them are 2.5. There might even be sections that are 4 meters wide.
Great, that's brilliant.
So-
And the feedback from the school when we had, principals along was that there was some concern, and Alex will know more about it than me and Joe, but around activity school, coming through, I'm not quite sure where it is, but
That must be that path.
yeah, it might be the same path, but I don't know how that's managed, but
No, I think it's also people cutting through the school to get to the other end of Kiwi2 Park towards the pools.
Yeah, there's a part of Travis Road through to Taiora.
it'll be just good to get some feedback from the school specifically in relation to that going. It might not be a perfect solution, but is there something else we can be doing in that?
I know,
Yeah.
I know we've done, and if you go back, Cindy, I'm not sure if this is going to necessarily support it. But we've done that, that one, that blue path down the bottom that runs along the side of the entrance into Kiwi2 Pool. That's not the right, I understand you're saying from down south through. But that portion that's around the turf, and it's not quite in this image, is a main entrance into Kiwi2 as well. We could maybe figure out how you can get from there to there. Yeah,
Just getting a bit of
Yeah.
more, like specific feedback.
Yeah.
About what the problem is.
yeah.
And we can then support them. Yeah.
All right, Joe?
Yeah, okay, while we're on that slide, the path that you've got going from the bottom of the field round to where the entrance comes in from from Barry. That point there where the paths combine and you go a little bit further. I've had feedback from quite a few people, especially one's mother's friends that want to go to Kiwi2, that there should be a path that just goes from the end of that over to the path that runs next to the facility.
I think the master plan's indicating space if they have ever had to have a future extension, and I know that's not.
No, but down here, it carries on, and then there's a path that goes along here. And they said it'd be really handy if there was a path, because at the moment they're trying to put the fence.
Oh,
over
okay.
the little wire fence.
We can look
Yes.
into that.
We have.
Yeah.
We have, yeah.
We have.
You have-
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that
that-
possible?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right,
Yeah, and.
no, keep going,
I've
yeah.
got a massive big list here, it's
Oh, really?
probably longer than Elvis's.
Yeah, and 3 apparently.
Okay, so the toilet that you mentioned,
Mhm.
is that additional to the changing facility?
Yes, so this master plan indicates that we were going to build on the edge of the Ascot Community Centre, but we've decided that it's better to build a separate facility because we can push it in a location that suits well for that part of the park. Yes, so it's separate.
Okay,
So there'll be 2 public toilets in the park.
okay, with the sports field, the grass training field and the event space, would the configuration of that suit events? because at the moment I'm just thinking about the events which are being held, and they usually have the stage on the east side so that the noise is projecting out. But with that configuration, I could imagine the stage being either north or south.
Yeah, we can work through with that. I think the mounting was to give them some viewing options as well as some shelter.
I can briefly, I talked to a promoter today about this specifically, the concerns, the space rather than the orientation specifically. So as long as we've got the room to hold those people safely, that's their biggest concern as opposed to.
I'm just thinking about residents, Alex, with the noise.
Yeah.
Because if the noise projects out over the swamp, it's much better than projecting out into the suburbs.
Yeah, we can work through those with the events team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the bonds proposal,
Mm-hmm.
have we looked at the possibility of a private partnership with them? Public-private partnership? Would that be something?
I don't know of us ever going into those relationships. Not when it's reserved land, but I can, yeah, it's kind
Because
of sitting with
they-
property, it's, yeah, I haven't really dealt with that lease.
With Drive World and the fun park that they had at QE2, and that was kind of a partnership similar to that. And the hydro slides, when they come into Christchurch to QE2, they were actually a private-public partnership.
Okay,
So
Back when it was cool.
yeah,
The blowcarts, not the blowcarts,
low cuts.
I think blowcarts, yeah, the blowcarts in Bexley Reserve are a similar kind of thing.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of there is a activity occurring on a reserve that is a business.
Yeah, that's not uncommon.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, I don't think Joe means a PPP type of
okay.
model with private capital kind of thing.
Because at the moment, I think the current, it's a lease for him to operate those activities. Yeah.
Yeah. So rather than because the council building is a public-private partnership, that is not a great deal for the council. But I think you're meaning more like the blowcarts, right?
No, I'm thinking like what we used to do with the hydro slide in the fun park.
So we have an investment. Is it more like the?
Well, you do, you
Is it more like the
used to
adventure
make
park?
money off the hydro slides as well as the hydro slide owners.
I'm not talking about a water hydro slide.
Yeah.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, because that was Ian Gamble, his family did it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you are talking about a PPP?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, well, I'm
I
just
suppose
throwing it out
from
there.
that's up to the leasee and property to maybe have a discussion about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And the project,
I'd not heard of that before, so.
okay, and the projects that are listed under the master plan in the latest long-term plan,
Yeah.
they're all itemised out with the costings next to it. Are those still in place as well as the QE2 sale money?
The sale money went into those budgets.
So that sale money is more or less.
We're spending it, yeah. That was the
Yeah.
purpose, was that the ring fence money was to develop the park.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
just wondering why.
And we're spending
they're
more than that.
itemised in the LTP as well as having that as an item in the LTP,
No, there's no line item that is
Yeah,
from the
there is.
sale. There is?
yes.
Okay, we might have seen some
It's
information.
in the funding.
We've only got about 4 minutes.
Okay,
Yep.
that's right.
No,
Is there more?
yeah, yeah, and then we may have time to come back, but
Thank you. Try to keep it quick. The first one is, I do think it would be useful for us to get the budget line for the money that came from the sale, and then the money for the other projects, and understanding like sports network field. And yeah, it'd be good just to know how much has been allocated for each in the current LTP, and then what's replaced in the draft annual plan.
My understanding is that, I do need to check the draft annual plan, but my understanding is that the funds from the school are in the line items that are in the LTP, but I'll
But if we
clarify
could just
that.
get something, it would be really useful.
Yeah,
The council hasn't made any decision on prioritising the sports network field plan
no, they haven't.
project, so.
No.
Again, understanding timing, I think would be good. I was really interested in if you'd considered some sort of skating facility. Obviously, we're going through and looking at what can be done in Washington Way.
Yeah,
But in terms of other sites where you might have that vertical element, you used to have one years ago.
we have it in the back of our mind with that request that's in council around the vert ramp as a possibility, but that's another, I suppose, piece of work that we're working on. And if we were to go down that road, then we'd be back at the board discussing it.
So how are we going to engage people around in terms of the elements that's in this plan?
Well, this is an approved master plan, so it's had a high level of engagement. So I think we're a little bit directed by what's currently in there. Otherwise, we'd need to take the master plan out for engagement again, which would result in the same type of process,
No, we
a
did that
council
thoroughly
decision and a
6 years
hearing.
ago.
Yeah.
So no.
So I think we've heard I think if skating came on the cards, we would look at how we could implement that into this plan. But I think the reason why we're trying to stay within the, I suppose, the realms of what's on that play space is to avoid reopening the whole plan and,
Yeah. Well,
you know, the whole
point of having a
discussion.
master plan, right?
Yeah, but I think it doesn't preclude, it doesn't
No, no,
preclude that stuff.
We can let stuff stop
Yeah.
and then you can go back to it.
It doesn't preclude from us ever considering that activity, but I think this point of time, that's what the budget is for. And aside from that, if those discussions lead us to here, then we can have another discussion about it.
Yeah, I mean, we did a master plan for Lancaster Park and a spatial plan, and it completely changed by the
That
evening.
wasn't quite the same. That was more of a landscape plan or a development plan. This was definitely, involved a 25-page document.
That's good.
Implementation
I'd just
and-
be open to making sure that we
Yeah,
could
yeah,
look at
no,
that
definitely.
in the future. And the final thing from me is, just really keen to understand how we could progress that relationship with the school and the issues that they're having. Because it seems to me that it's been possibly an unintended consequence of the public access that's creating problems. So just the ability to talk to the school and maybe the Ministry of Education and council around how we might come up with a better solution, I think, and including the sports fields as well.
Definitely, but it's cool.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We have 1 minute. Alex, you have one more question?
Feel free to say no.
Yeah.
Is there a time that you can give us where you may have an update on the timeframes and the timelines to go back to the community or something? Estimate, or is that not possible at this stage?
It depends.
Okay.
No, not right this minute.
Yeah.
But now that we've got a little bit more clarity about the things that you are really interested in, and I can work with Megan on just making sure we're looking at the right budgets and we know where we stand, then I can plan ahead. But I'm definitely keen to get this moving again as quick as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
All right. The next item is around the future of the very preliminary, but about the future of the organic processing plant. So I'd like to invite Alec and Hannah out separate. Before we start, we've in the last 24 hours, they've got some very frustrating news that in fact the resource consent for the organics, the new organics processing plant has actually been delayed, and ultimately at this point it could be 6 months down the track, in early February, in early 2027, that it would be fully operational. And that's because ECAN frankly have put the ball on the resource consent. I have seen Greg Burns, the councillor, provided some information, said from that the CE's office from the regional council has provided information that there was a fault in the system used to manage consents that resulted in a miscalculation of processing days and subsequently information not being sent to affected parties on time, extending the processing time by approximately 2 weeks. Staff are investigating the cause of this fault to prevent it from happening in the future. As you'll be aware, this particular institution has significant problems with processing resource consents and meeting statutory timeframes. It's not out of the ordinary, but it does affect our community, and we were provided the wrong information at the CIG meeting, which, Yana, you are 100% correct. I want to acknowledge that, and that you outlined it And there was no adequate response at the meeting, and now it's been subsequently cleared up. It's very frustrating, and I'd say it's nothing to do with the city council staff. City council staff haven't received haven't received the information that they should have either. So there's no point in talking about this any further now, because we want to talk about the future of the site. So let's just park the frustration and what has happened up to now, and let's have a look in our discussion about what the future. And we're talking about the process for getting to where that area is returned to something that is good for our community. So over to you guys. Do you want to give a presentation summary of where we are, and then we'll take questions and discussion from there? And just bearing in mind also that we have the police coming we've got a lot of things to talk about with the police at past, so we do need to make sure we finish up in time because the regional commander is here.
Cool, thank you. So thanks for giving us the opportunity to talk to you. Obviously, I'm Alec, and we've got Hannah. Lynn is our project manager for this particular project. She's off sick just now. She's got a sinus infection. But basically what we want to do is just take you through. If we just go to the next slide.
It's not working, I'll do it.
No, it's not, sorry.
So effectively, what we're looking at is trying to figure out how we engage with the community in advance of any auctioneering or any sort of thoughts as to what the site might be. And we're just interested, is there anything that we should be knowing in advance of preparing that engagement plan? We'll go through and talk to you about some of the parameters we'll have to work to and the sort of considerations, if you like, the framework that we need to use when we're managing the expectations of the community. There is an internal process as well. But if you just move on to the next slide. So just a little bit of background to recap. Obviously, the council decided December 23 to close the OPP. Decided before that, went through a procurement process. That procurement process concluded with the award of a contract to Ecogas, and that was signed off by council in December 23. And effectively, the new site, as you just discussed, is going through a resource consent just now. And it's anticipated that will be opened at the end of 26 and fully operational during 27. And what that does is it presents an opportunity to think, well, what do we do with the old site once that site is cleared? And obviously it's got some bespoke infrastructure there. It's got a large open blank area, blank canvas, but the building and the structure is quite unique. And on the next one. So this is the site as it looks just now. Obviously different to what you've been used to in the past. The site is empty in terms of external storage, so there's no composting or any material stored outside. The processing takes place inside the building, and then basically it's loaded out in trucks and sent to Cape Valley. So what you've got in the site itself is this unique building, processing hall, got the 18 tunnels, what could they be in the future? Got the external biofilter, and you've got the settlement ponds towards this end of the slide, and you've got that large blank area in between. It's roughly a 9-hectare site, so it's a reasonably big size of property. Yeah. Next one. So some of the considerations that we are thinking about, and obviously you can add to these as you start to think about it yourself. First one's the community. We need to understand what the community does and doesn't want the site to be. We've got to understand what the impacts are on the wider community of the region, depending on what we use the facility for. Is there synergy for the rest of the city? We're interested in obviously input from EB and what the site, what it eventually becomes, and what their view there is. We've got to be careful that whatever we do with the site, we don't start encroaching on other people's territory. So whatever we do with it, we've got to take account of the non-government organisations, environmental groups, maybe even some commercial players. But the site could present employment opportunities, it could present entrepreneurship opportunities. It's a blank canvas depending on what you do with it. It could have an impact on climate change, a positive impact, depending on what we do. It will obviously have an impact on rates once we get to the stage of sorting out a budget and figuring out what the development plan is. And internally, it's got to align to the sort of policy and the framework that we're following. It's got to sort of be attentive to the compliance issues around it. What the area is zoned for and what the permitted land uses are, all that sort of technical stuff. Next one. So There are some constraints, you know, we spoke about a couple of them, the zoning, the traffic impacts, the financial implications. We've got procurement rules inside, so, you know, inside council, so there's a certain process that we have to go through. The first stage in that process will be what we normally do with land banks that come up that are under council ownership, is you offer them up internally, part or all of the site. And you just make sure that nobody inside council is looking for a piece of land to do something, so that you've got the ironic, you know, outcome that they go and buy a new bit of land when we had a bit of land that potentially satisfied whatever it is they wanted to do. But even with whatever they want to do, it still has to fit that criteria we just spoke about. We don't want it to become a setup or an activity that impacts on the amenity of the community. Next one. So I guess the next steps for us is to basically do that process internally and establish what if any, internal requirements there are, if people are looking for land to support their activities. And then we'll move into the technical stuff, do planning assessments. But by that point, we'll understand what part of the site is going to be made available, and what part is perhaps being set aside. So at the moment, one area of the site's been set aside for the heritage team, and they're using it for the storage of all the bits and pieces that they've taken over the years from various buildings and parts of the city. So they've now got that stored there on that site. And then ultimately what we want to get through to at this stage is, even before we start considering what the options are, is what is the engagement plan with the community? How are we going to get the community voice into this process? And then give it the consideration it deserves before we even get to. So we don't want to go down the route of saying, here's 5 options, consult, pick one. We want to do it the opposite way around, to actually feed into that optioneering from the ground up. And that's us, I think, yeah. So happy to take any questions. I don't know if I have anything to add. No?
Well,
Didn't kick me, so I must have.
so I'll start with a couple of things. I mean, I think just to underline, I mean, I know this from talking to you, Alec, that council knows that it can't have anything that generates noise, vibration, stink, dust, anything like that. Like that's off the table. So take all that stuff off the table. Well, this is something, it needs to be something that we're returning it to community use. And even if it's an addition, if it's a council use, or part of it is council use, it has to meet those criteria. So that's what the land use kind of references are in that, because you have to, you know, for anybody who doesn't know what that means and might be watching, I just want to make sure that that's really clear. But the second, just in terms of a general principle, I think that if we're consulting, doing pre-consultations, we call it, with the community, it needs to start with the most affected people from the organics processing plant and move out. So, you know, you've got the most affected area, you've got the local, the particular part of Bromley that's most affected, then you've got the Bromley, the wider Bromley, and then you've got the wider kind of Linwood ward area. And then from there, you've got, you know, interested parties across the rest of the city. And, you know, as a general principle, I think that's kind of the way to go. I'm going to have to ask Jackie to step into the chair, because I think there's an issue with my son. I've got a disabled son. And so I'm just going to ask Jackie if we could take over for a second.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I go to the metro very often, and I personally don't believe that pits are big enough where you dump all your rubbish. And for me, and I hope that people's choice and left-leaning people and others, that number one priority would be more recycling. And the stuff that goes into that pit, a huge percentage of it could be recycled. So is there a way of putting our money where our mouths are and investing in doing that somewhere there?
Yeah, so we can address that. That's a separate project that's already in train. So there's a transfer station redevelopment project which is looking exactly at that. And the main focus of that is prioritising the works. Those sites are 40+ years old, so there's some key assets there that need to be upgraded, replaced and renewed. So they would take priority. And then eventually we get to the resource recovery areas and just revamping them and setting them out in a different way that makes it more user-friendly for the public. So that the idea would be you're just more inclined to go through that process and get rid of stuff before you eventually end up at the tip with your residual waste. Whereas at the moment, about 60% of the traffic drives round the resource recovery area and goes straight to the pit. So that works in hand, and you'll see that coming through the annual plan process and the long-term plans
So you
as
need
well.
some of that land, wouldn't you, for that?
No, there's plenty of room on site. That can all be contained within the transfer station site. So no, we don't want to take this land away and use it for that. No.
Okay. Just one comment would be, when that happens, I think it should be all council owned, not leased to somebody else.
Okay.
Because I won't tell you why, but it should be.
Thanks. Yanni?
Thank you. I was just wondering if we could get just a clear timeframe and of the key milestones, and also who the key decision makers are. Like, when does this go to council for a decision? Does council make the decision? Does the community make the decision? What's the decision making?
So the ultimate decision will be council. We'll have to follow council's decision making protocol, and it'll have to line up with the policies and the frameworks and the Local Government Act, etc. The decision making or the engagement process we want to do this year. So we want to get that engagement plan in train now. That will come through the council system for consideration and comment and feedback and approval. And then we would then go forward with the community towards the end of this year and then the start of next year. Because obviously we're aiming for, if possible, to have a plan in place ready to go when the cycle.
Sorry, do we have a kind of, like in the presentation, we don't have any time frame?
No, we're going to work on that next. That's the next. This is just an initial conversation with you. There is no engagement plan timeline set out now. That will come through the council system as this year goes forward.
What would you like from us today?
Just this sort of initial feedback or ideas on how you think the community could be engaged with to give the question.
You usually have quite a few ideas around consultation.
Right, I do, but I also am mindful of some of the decisions that council's made where there's no community consultation. And so that's why I think getting clarity between the role of the community board and the council in terms of decision making is really important. Like, we just made a decision at council yesterday without any public consultation.
Can we focus on the matter at hand?
Yeah. So that's why I was just trying to get clarity around understanding the processes and what decision making sits where and when. Because I think that's kind of one of the first steps, is to kind of understand, you know, is it a draft annual plan? Is it a long-term plan? Is it a SCP? Like, what is the decisions that are being made by who and at what point? So that once we understand that, I think it's easier to give feedback about different things. I just had one specific question, which was around,
Like, can we, like, I'm genuinely interested in what you think the ideal process would be. If we've been asked at a very early stage, so we have the ability to shape it. Like, take the later decisions that council may or may not make out of it, and think, okay, well, what would lead, do you think, to the best outcome if all the decision making processes also lined up with that?
I mean, my view has been that we should do a lot more of local planning charrettes with local communities, where we actually engage with them on site or in the space. We bring in experts to kind of present information and ideas about what's possible. We listen to what we work alongside the community around the planning, and we go from there. In terms of this site, there is existing infrastructure, and I don't know what the quantity of value is. You've kind of said what's on the existing site, and I guess what I don't understand is how much of that is stuff that could be retained, and what's the value of retaining it versus the benefit of probably removing it or so.
Which is information that we want, but just in terms of the process of engaging the community, like this is what we've been specifically asked about, and like what you've said is really helpful. But is there anything else around how we engage with that community?
The one question I had was around traffic impacts, and what are the constraints around traffic impacts? I know there's a community desire for a pathway somewhere in this space, and I know there's also been consideration of a permanent bus depot. So I think understanding the constraints and then what the analysis is of other things
So are you saying like, because.
So ECAM, like engaging with ECAM to me.
Yeah.
Is kind of important.
But what I'm saying is like, so when you say constraints, like I do think that we need to be really very clear, and I think this is part of what you're saying, very clear about what the actual constraints are, because what we don't want to do is make promises and then break them or not keep them, because that's not fair generally, but specifically with this community that's been, you know, let down so often.
Yeah.
So we do need to know the constraints, and when we go out, the community needs to know what they are, so that when we're doing blue sky thinking with them, that they, you know, they know how much space there is.
Precisely, and that's the reason why we're not briefing you today and then going out and talking to the community tomorrow. This is a very early heads up. We want to keep you in the loop with everything that we're doing with this project. And the next step is doing all of that work so that we can understand the constraints and speak to the community with some level of scope of influence, so that we're not raising expectations and we're creating productive, meaningful engagement.
Right, and has one idea that's been considered is to sell off the site and to take the money that's from the site being sold off, reinvest it back into the local community that's borne the brunt of it.
Well, that's us getting to the options, and again, all of those options would all come out in the process, and nothing would be on or off the table. But again, it's the framework.
Yeah.
You know, without climbing into the detail there, there would be a consequence to selling the site. There'll be a net book value, et cetera. So, but yeah, those sort of things. You know, if you sell the site, you lose control, and you don't know who's there afterwards. So there's all sorts of things but that would, yeah, in the end, when we come to council for an ultimate decision, we're going to have to set out how the process of how we've got to those options and what those options are and the consequences of them.
And again, like just remind members that we're not trying to preempt. We're talking about going to the community from the beginning, and we're not wanting to preempt what the use might be. Like there's any number of options out there. At the very beginning, we should be within those constraints, actual constraints. We should be able to have a discussion, and like one of them might be selling it off, or might be, you know, any number of things, but that's currently not our job. You know, this is a conversation with the community. Do we have any further questions? Or Alex?
Yeah, I just know that a few, like how to phrase it, people that are keen to bring rugby league in the NRL to Christchurch are keen on some potential sites. This could prove it exciting. This is
the same. Oh, I just talked about this. Like I'm supporting you. It's great that we have ideas and that we're not at the ideas phase. And this is the thing: is this our job at this point is to shape the engagement so that it reflects.
Okay, I'll re-clarify. I think it'd be great that when consulting with internal staff about how they've looked at other spaces potentially for this.
And with sporting codes.
And with sporting codes, perhaps, as has been mentioned, to ensure that this is looked into.
Yeah. I do think something that Yanni touched on is a bit like the what's the word, citizens assembly, not quite, but you know, where you get a group of representative people from the community. Because this is a different, challenging site, right? It's land that's industrial, it's right by a sewage pond, it's right by a dump. Like it's actually a challenging set of variables with existing buildings which are for a specific purpose. So having some kind of when you've been through those layers, when it comes to actually talking about the options, like having some kind of really deliberative focus of people from the affected communities, I think would be really cool.
I just feel like there's I don't say rust, but if council makes the call to look at land disposal, which it's doing quite a lot now, there's a lot of land that's been disposed by council, and I'm just wondering, like, at what stage, like, if council resolves to retain it and look at a community use or look at options, is that better to get that decision now so we don't go down this whole process and then just have it, you know, put into an annual plan that says we can raise X, Y, Z?
Yeah. Oh,
so that's probably why I was trying to get a little bit of clarity.
I totally agree with
the
you.
point that Alex made too was on that future use constraints thing. I'm just feeling like we just lack a little bit of information and detail.
Mm.
And until we get that detail, then I think, yeah, it's a little bit hard just to go open to the community.
Because,
Yeah.
I mean, we have the land disposal, we have the process, right? It's available. What we need to do before we enter into engagement with the community is to know that essentially it's going to go outside that land disposal process so that it's determinative, the community engagement is determinative. So if the community want it just to take the money, sell it, take the money and use it for other things, then that's one thing. But if that decision, as Yanni has rightly pointed out, has to be made, the council decision has to be made prior to the actual engagement starting. Otherwise, it risks the whole project.
Let's get a question. Just to clarify, with the tree branches, that's not being affected,
What do you mean by
where they get munched up and,
green waste?
yeah.
In what way do you mean
Is that
affected?
going as well? The processing of that, or does that stay on site?
The green waste process, all processing will leave the site. The drop off of green waste at the transfer station, that will remain the same.
So they'll just put it through the machine, then take it away.
It'll basically be dropped loose and then loaded into trucks and then taken to the new processing plant once that's open.
As branches.
Yes.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. And then it's shredded at that end, at the processing end inside the building.
Would be better to shred it, then take it. Yeah. Okay.
So I guess just in terms of that process stuff, if we can get back from you at least clarification on what would need to happen to change the normal disposal of land process. And that way, I imagine that, it would be a council decision.
Yeah, we can, that's a valid point. We'll have that conversation internally and then we'll find out the process to get that answer and then we'll deal with that first, yeah.
Yeah,
just quickly. We talked about the pits being 40 years old and it'd be updated. I think whatever happens, there needs to be an area left for 40 years' time to make sure we're not going to be having no land for the future processing, whatever it is. So that's something we need to take into consideration as well.
Any further questions? No? All right. Well, thank you. We have 5 minutes until the police arrive. Yeah, that's
Exciting stuff, eh?
Yeah, that's absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks, Alec.
Finally. Leave it.
No.
I mean,
I don't know, actually, I don't know if there's any IP blocking, but, yeah. Right, Korua, thank you for joining us. Just for people, who may be watching, we have, Lane Todd and Glenn Barnaby here from the police. Yeah, welcome. And you have a bunch of questions, from, elected members, so some of which are on behalf of the community. Happy if you want to start, with addressing those questions, as you like, and then, we may have some time for more discussion, and more questions.
Kia ora koutou, and Lane Todd's my name. I'm superintendent and I'm the Metro Area Commander in charge of policing services for Christchurch City. So welcome, and I'll hand over to my colleague for a question.
I'm the Area Prevention Manager for Christchurch Metro and, Area Prevention Manager, sorry, for Christchurch Metro. And some of my portfolios that I lead include community, neighbourhood policing, beat, family harm and youth as well.
Thanks, Glenda, and just like to acknowledge everybody from the board today and city councillors, and thank you for the opportunity for us to come out today. We have got a series of questions that we were sent, so if that's okay, we'll run through those and then obviously open to the floor for any further clarification or any questions. Okay, so no particular order. So my first question is that why is the station so often closed? Talking about New Brighton. Media reports suggest police were unaware of complaints, yet this has been raised repeatedly. Why hasn't there been direct engagement? We've been told the station isn't closed, but the front counter is often shut due to staffing shortages over many years. What's the plan to address this? Could the station be reopened with a retired or non-sworn officer, or could existing staff be reassigned to keep it open? Reports indicate several local police staff are on long-term leave, leaving the front desk closed and reducing outreach. Are there plans to fully staff this again? So there's a couple of questions aligned. So, yes, the front counter staff, which are the ones that obviously run at stations like here, Hornby, Papanui, South Station and Christchurch Central, we do have shortages in that team at the moment. And so the decision we've had to make is, which is the station that has the most demand in terms of people coming through the door looking for service. So New Brighton and Hornby are quite low in terms of that service requirement. Obviously, our stations at Papanui, South Station and Christchurch Central in particular have a far greater flow of people and requests that come through. So we haven't made that decision at the moment while that particular team is short of staff, that our New Brighton station has been closed to the public for a period of time.
Is that indefinite?
Not indefinite at this point, but hard to say when we can actually fix that. But what I would make the point is that we still have several teams working out of New Brighton Station. So we have our frontline that work 24/7 based out of New Brighton. Glenda's got several teams based out of there as well. We've got a community team, youth services team and neighbourhood policing team based out of there. And so we do have quite a large number of people still based at the station, albeit we're not providing service to the front counter. What I would also say to that, though, is that we certainly encourage the community to use our other ways that they can report matters. So 111 for any emergency, 105, or of course on our website. And for those that want to, obviously they can drive to one of our other sites. But predominantly, there are several mechanisms that people can use to report matters to us.
Would you prefer to address the questions and then take questions, or are you happy to take some questions throughout?
Just, yeah, we can go throughout if you like, if that's easier.
Throughout. So Celeste has a question about.
Yeah, so I think there's like 3 blocks of questions, so we can just at the end of each. So in terms of New Brighton Station, it's hard to assess demand, isn't it? Because we don't know what demand is if the station isn't accessible. So I'm interested to know what the steps are around that, because if people are not being able to get in, are they? Yes. Yeah, it's a bit of a chicken and egg, isn't it? And I went to the Hornby station and spoke to the officer there, and he said that they kept that station open. There was a decision to do that because there was actually a need in the community to have that accessibility. So it's not just numbers, but it's actually being able to go and talk to someone in the community. Bearing in mind it's a lower decile area and the needs are quite different. probably he's got different needs, but also has that need for front. And the second question is around teams. How do people so if the people operating out of the station 24 hours, how do people actually reach the people within the station if you're directed to the central station for any queries? To give an example, sorry, it's a long question, we'll get up to the end. We had a comment from a member of the community said she tried to pick up some leaflets to put in some bags that are given to welcome people to the community. She went to the local station, it's closed. She went to the Sydenham station, she couldn't access anybody there. She called the central line and they wouldn't give her any contacts at the local station. So just going around in circles and she gave up. So the feedback I'm getting is there is some frustration there in terms of having a station visible, yet no actual accessibility and no means to talk to anyone except for via 111, which sometimes isn't getting followed up as of recently. So there's a whole bunch of concerns around that, which we probably don't have time to cover today, but.
So in relation to Hornby, Hornby is a site that has relatively low numbers as well in terms of people coming through the front counter. And there are times when that's been shut for a reasonably extended periods of time for similar reasons for here. But predominantly in terms of, we did a review probably 2 or 3 years ago now and looked at the number of people coming through the station doors and then actually what the requests for service were. And what we established actually was some of the calls for service from our front counters actually weren't police business. So they were either city council, maybe another government agency, but it happens that we were the ones open, so we were the port of call. So when we take all that out and look at actually what people need to come in to the front counter for, we also identified that actually some of the reporting could be done online. You physically didn't need to come to the station. And then when you take that out, and then plus what's predominantly historic that could be dealt with online, people just need an insurance number to claim, a police file number to claim the insurance. So that's why when we've looked at all that data, New Brighton and Hornby is quite low. And then if we look at our other sites, which is South Station, Papanui, and certainly Central is by far the busiest, as you'd expect. So that answers that question. In relation to how do we access people? So yeah, 111 is always going to be for an emergency. And that may well be that either if there's an emergency here, for example, there'll be cars coming from New Brighton, but there may well be cars coming from other parts of the city as well, depending what the incident is. So with that sort of information, with that sort of detail that's coming through, the comm centre will be the one that takes the information, not necessarily the person that's sitting in the car that's responding to the job. And the reason we need that is we need somebody at the call centre actually taking the information, not focused on the driving and all the other things that they need to be thinking about. If it's a routine inquiry, that can always be done through 10.5, and they do make their way through to the particular officer if that's what's required.
I know I've sent through some others, but I guess the heart of the questions comes down to this idea that frontline policing is pretty hard to do if you don't have a way to access the front line. And the front line needs a physical presence. And I think, you know, the feedback from members of the community has been that there's been no real communication about what the plans are for the station. So the fact that there was a review is a bit of a surprise to me. I'm not sure when you said that was being done, but it'd be interesting to get a copy of this public information around that in terms of what that shows, in terms of the need, but also in terms of the back to basics kind of policing model that we're looking at, we're understanding that as we're moving to, how is that being put in place in areas of higher need, such as some other parts of the joint ward area, but in this case, New Brighton. So is there a more active police presence on the ground in terms of reaching out to retailers who are currently getting absolutely slammed with various types of crime, and some of it is 111 calls, which haven't been responded to at all?
Yeah, so I think if you talk about what's access to front line, I mean, I'd argue the opposite to that, which is we've actually increased their front line. You know, the current government's put another 500 in, albeit that's coming through the pipeline. We've increased their beat team, which we'll talk about later. That's an extra 18 staff on the front line. We've increased their front line staff, our response team, which is the ones that do 24/7. And then in terms of actually, you know, what does that community want to see? And I'll talk about, you know, where we're sitting in terms of getting back to core basic policing. People actually want well, that's actually the next question around visibility. People actually want to see police out in the street. They want to see police actually out in the community. They don't want to see police behind a desk. And so that's getting that back to basics. So we have increased that. Now, I totally accept that some people do want to go to a police station and physically talk to a police officer at a desk. Ultimately, a lot of the people that do want to have that access have got other mechanisms they can report. If we ask their community, do they want a frontline police officer to turn up to my house when there's an emergency, or do I want a police officer sitting at a desk? They want the police officer to be available to go to that incident at the house, not sitting at the desk 8 till 4, Monday to Friday. So those are the gambles we have to work through, or not gambles, those are the parameters we have to work through. In terms of getting back to basics, essentially, we could talk about it for a while, but I'll keep it succinct. If we look at policing today and over recent years, policing has been quite challenging. We're involved in a lot of work that's actually not police work. So if we look at mental health, you know, we're not psychologists, we're not psychiatrists. We've been picking up a lot of work that actually doesn't sit with us, and that takes up a lot of our time. And when I say our time, it's the front line. And we did some data reasonably recently of how much time that takes off our front line. So if I talk about mental health, attempted suicides, and when I say attempted suicides, that's potential people verbally socialising that versus physically doing it, because if they're physically trying to, of course, we will have an intervention. And then the other one is the lower family harm. And when I say that, that's predominantly a 12-year-old boy or girl saying to their mum and dad, I'm not going to give you my cell phone, and then that gets a 111 phone call. That's not really core police business. So if I take those three things there, for example, that equated to something like 45% of our frontline staff, we're dealing with that. Now that's taking away from core business. So that's when we talk about getting back to core business. The current government and our new commissioner has challenged us as commanders to say, what do we need to do to get back to police core business?
Would preventing crime be considered core business? So if someone to say there is somebody in Brothermore threatening a member of a business owner, and they call 111 and there's no response whatsoever, and then that person goes on further on to damage a whole bunch of buildings in their Brighton, would you consider that to be core business?
So it's a wee bit hard to talk about specifics, but if there's a mental health issue and there's a crime that sits behind it, we'll deal with the crime, but actually health needs to deal with the mental health or the social sector that puts that person in the first place. So to answer your question, prevention is still part of policing, but we've got other agencies that actually need to step up.
And the final question on that front is around the beat officers, and because I guess there's a bit of a challenge there in that we hear about resources being reallocated to the front line, whatever that means in this context. But if we're not seeing a response to 111 calls, we're not seeing more people in our communities to be proactive and prevent the stuff when it's reported, and retailers don't feel like they're being engaged with, and that was something that the police minister highlighted as being a priority. Where are those resources going apart from, say, gang patches and things like that, which, to be honest, I don't really see as an issue over the side of town?
Well, I'd have a different argument to that one for a start, but I think it's, look, ultimately where we're going at the moment is that we ask the question, is this core business, and prevention is part of core business, and visibility and retail crime, which you've touched on, is absolutely core business for us. And we know nationwide, and Christchurch is not exempt from that, as retail crime is certainly one of our major issues at the moment. But if we look back to where we were 2 years ago, we had ram raids through the roof, we had youth offending through the roof. All those crimes have dropped down significantly. Now, we are putting a lot more effort into retail crime, and Glenn is going to talk about some statistics and the impact we've had already in the last 6 months with that. And so we are definitely very focused on retail crime. But in terms of reallocating staff to the front line, ultimately, as I said, if we're not doing the work we need to do, and we're doing, dare I say, other agencies' work, that's where the problems are. So, and as I demonstrated before with the percentage of work that we have been involved in that's not core police business, that has a huge impact on us. So we need to reinvest that back into front line.
Can I just up on that particular line? Like the Phillipstown Neighbourhood Policing Team being redeployed to the beat team or wherever they're being redeployed. I'd like to understand, from your perspective, as to why that has happened, but also like that there is a real sense of concern and loss in that around the Linwood area, which, you know, we had a meeting yesterday about, and I've got a whole bunch of stuff that people want communicated back to the police, which I will run through. But just on the neighbourhood policing team, like, I mean, I am aware that the research from around the world says that's the kind of policing that is the most effective in reducing crime.
Yeah.
And they're gone from this part of the city. It's great that Aranui team's still there, but so what's going on from your perspective?
I'll let Glenda answer that question.
I'm probably a little bit disappointed in probably the narrative around the NPTs or the neighbourhood policing team, because their core business has not really changed in any way whatsoever. Yes, they've been renamed and supporting the BEAT initiative, but it's no different to what they were doing previously. Their engagement with Eastgate Mall, Phillipstown Community, Kaingaora and other agencies has continued the same. Nothing. Their core BAU basically is what BEAT is set up to do. It's about community engagement, reassurance and visibility. So I would challenge the fact that they have lost service within Phillipstown as a result of NPTs being having a name change temporarily until we work out the dynamics around how that will look moving forward with the BEAT teams. So with Eastgate Mall, for example, and we're kind of moving into the other questions here, that their engagement with Eastgate, when they were set up in July 24, the reported crime and the statistic there is significantly decreased over time, over the last 12 months. And their engagement with the Eastgate community and the Eastgate Mall, they're there every day when they're working. And we have 3 BEAT teams that are deployed 7 days a week now, and earlies and late shift, depending on where the demand is.
It's clear within Eastgate.
And the surrounds. So the communities around, like they're not just within the mall, but the shopping centre around.
Yeah, the local retailers around that Eastgate intersection definitely report that there's been an increase in issues over the past 3 or 4 months, and that they are not seeing a police presence like they used to see. Now, I don't know why that is. I mean, I understand that your eyes can't be everywhere, and I also don't think that having a policeman on every corner is a solution to problems. To every problem, but it's like the sense of that there is a sense that the police just don't have a presence in that part of Linwood like there used to be, and that the bylaw is not enforced around the window washers, which is where there's drug dealing going on amongst those window washers, and they seem to continue that with impunity.
And just drawing on that for you, Brighton, is there any plans? Because I mean, there is a neighbourhood policing team, BEAT team in that area, but there's nothing out here because we have stations, but those officers are deployed across the city. So, is there any plans to deploy any of those new BEAT teams to this part of town?
They are now.
Because I would echo the sentiment that the anecdotal reporting is that there's been an increase in retail crime. Because people aren't bothering to report because there has been no response often, and therefore it's a chicken and egg. People will post it on Facebook, a photo of an offender, because they get a better response and they can't obviously visit the station. So,
yeah, I mean, look, I can't talk for people that don't report stuff. Obviously, we always encourage people to report stuff, but the reported calls for service have dropped significantly. And I get data every day around where the BEAT team's operating, and they are operating more than what we were under the neighbourhood policing plan in terms of out here, but not only this mall, other parts of the city as well.
So there are BEAT teams coming to New Brighton Mall specifically?
Our deployment model is around evidence-based. Where are the hotspots? Where is the visibility required? Where is our crime types? Where do we need to go? And we deploy to those high-risk hotspots within the city. Now, we have a community services team here in New Brighton, and they themselves have been doing active patrols, and that was based on some concerns that were raised some time ago, and to support the BEAT. BEAT has been out here, and their report is that there's very few people around the shops. There's a lot of shops that are closed, that it's actually about visibility. There's no one around to see that they are here. I am just disappointed that people are concerned that are not reporting via 105, because that supports our data for understanding where the concerns are and what those concerns may be.
I've got a few questions building up. So Celeste and I have had a bit of go. Greg, sorry it's taken so long. Kelly, Joe, and then Yanni.
You said at the start there you're having staffing shortages for the counter, that thing. Are you actively looking to replace those staff or not?
Well, we are reviewing our whole district staffing at the moment, and I don't want to predict where that goes, but so there is a review in process at the moment.
So there is a difference though between having a shortage and actively looking to replace that shortage.
Well, what we have to do is look at we've got a new commissioner obviously now, and so we've had to look at our priorities at a district level and then obviously for the city. So that just, as you would expect with any business, when you get a new chief executive in, we have to look at our structure and then look at where we're putting our resources.
Kelly?
Thanks for coming on today. Certainly appreciate what we've been doing. I just wonder if you could provide a context around speeding drivers. There are a lot of complaints like you, people of Burwood about people speeding through their neighbourhoods, etc. What percentage of your force in Christchurch focus on speeding? And do they work in neighbourhoods? And I guess, is it related to being contacted by 105 and things like that?
So I'll try and succinctly answer the question. So in terms of road policing requirement, every police officer has a percentage of our time salary that's allocated to road policing, and then we have our permanent full-time road policing units. So I guess to easily answer your question, all of us have a road policing target, including us. So that's one answer. The second answer is yes, we do actively road policing in the suburbs, and I don't have the road policing data with us at the moment, but for Christchurch Metro, all our matrix, we're above where we need to be for our targets, with the exception of over 80 Ks, which obviously isn't in this part of the community. We're slightly below where we need to be with that. And in terms of reporting, like if it's what you deem as dangerous driving, someone doing burnouts or something like that, that's a 111. If it's someone that I think every day just rushing to work and 60 Ks and a 50, then that might be a 105.
Oh, that's useful. Thank you.
All right, Joe and then Yanni.
Yeah, thank you. One of the biggest concerns I'm hearing is people are giving up on 105 and they're not waiting because it's taking too long, and even if they do ring, they're not getting a response. So are you looking at more staff to work on the 105 number or answer questions or take reports?
Yes.
The 105 call line, do acknowledge that there may be challenging times there with response times. However, there is a second initiative, which is online reporting, and that automatically, immediately gives you the ability to have a reference number, a file number, and it gets into our system just as quick, if not quicker, than actually talk to someone on the phone. I do appreciate that a lot of the community don't have access to online reporting, but with access to phones, it's a very simple process. Did it myself recently in my private life, and it was so easy just to go and enter a few details and boom, I had a file number, I had a report. That goes into our overall stats as well as to what is the problem in that area, because it reads where you are and the location, so it is very good. The 105 is a bigger challenge because it's a national call centre, and nothing that we really have control of, unless you'd like to add to that, but do acknowledge that there may be delays depending on the peak times at which the calls are made.
But yeah, because most people are aware of the website as well, but I think most people aren't reporting because it's just too much of a process for them. So would you be looking at increased staff?
I understand they are looking at a review at the moment. But as Glenn said, that's through Police National Headquarters, that doesn't sit with us.
But the amount of reporting could be swayed, or the crime could be swayed because people aren't reporting it.
Yeah.
Whereas if people started reporting it, you'd probably get a better idea of statistics.
What I would say, I think a couple of you have raised it in relation to retail crime and perhaps a slower response to it. We have had a dedicated team focused on our recidivist high-end retail offenders, and there's been a few high profile court cases in media in the last week.
Yes, I know.
And we've got others in the pipeline. So what that's already signalling to our community, hopefully, is particularly the organised crime side of it, which is what this is. You know, we're talking thousands of dollars a day from individuals. And then the flow on market to that is, of course, they're selling cheap goods to other people, so they're part of that chain as well. So we're definitely having a hard focus on that particular group at the moment, and working really well with our local retailers and how we can identify them and put some prevention messages. So we're sort of coming at the high end, but also at the low end as well.
Yeah, because a lot of people as well are concerned that even if they do report, there's no consequence, there's no follow-up. So I think it's really important to try and work on improving that as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, we'll go to Yanni and we'll kind of go back to your list of questions, just because I know that a number of the things that will be on our minds have already been sent through to you. So, Yanni?
Yeah, I mean, we've sort of gone all over the place. So, you know, you may cover this later, but I guess this is a starting point. When we got briefed on New Brighton, I was quite keen for us just to have have context of what's the picture looking like in terms of our board's area around where the hotspots are, where the resourcing's going. So, yeah, I mean, you kind of touched on that right at the start, but is there some data that you can share with us about what the hotspots are, what the trends are around the types of crimes? I had a kind of specific question around the 30k speed limits as well, and just kind of general question around enforcement, what do you call it, compliance, any thoughts on what you're seeing around that sort of road antisocial behaviour, or I guess what I'm hearing from communities who are trying to do the right thing, go the right speed limit, is they're getting attacked, they're getting road rage, they're getting a lot of anxiety trying to do the right thing. And I just was kind of interested in how you're policing those speed limit changes and whether there's anything we can do as a city to try and make your jobs easier in that regard. So sorry, those are the two questions. And then there was a third one around a community safety panel, but again, maybe that you talked about later on. And really the big picture data.
Yeah, we'll go back to the questions, because that is in the questions that have been sent through.
I just commenting on what sort of crime types we're seeing. There's an independent analysis done by the Christchurch Community Business Association, and they looked at the crime types within the wider central city. Pretty much the biggest one is intoxication, aggressive, threatening behaviour is 48% of what has been reported, with 34% begging and rough sleeping, and then it reduces down to 16% of theft, shoplifting, break-ins. But when we look at the stats for Eastgate, for example, clearly theft and dishonesty is what there, and that reporting is through Aurora, and we are utilising that tool as part of an investigative to target those, as Lane alluded to, those high-end offenders. Unless we understand the hotspots for this area is pretty much central at Eastgate and Eastgate Mall, and what has been reported there around dishonesty primarily, with a little bit of the aggressive, threatening behaviour. Certainly not anything that is highlighted out here, and that could be the lack of confidence perhaps in reporting. It's an area that I can see that we need to report on, encouraging people to utilise 105 and online reporting. In emergency situations, clearly one, and you should get a response. Our calls for service have reduced, and there is an expectation that that we will be attending critical incidents within a reasonable timeframe.
And I'll come to road policing in a second, but probably another bit of data around that is if I go back a year ago and I get a daily report to say how many jobs are sitting in the system, you know, that follow through from shift to shift. about a year ago, on average, if you're a frontline senior sergeant in Christchurch starting, you could have anything between 50 to 100 jobs pending, what we call pending. Which is, you imagine you're starting your shift with your staff and you've already got 50 to 100 jobs sitting pending before you even get out the door. Today, particularly over the last 6 months, when we've refocused ourselves back to core business, and we're still doing more work to do on that, on average now it sort of sits usually about sort of 10 to 15, which is what you'd expect for a city this size. So that alone has been able to free up our demand for our frontline staff. And then, so getting to road policing, as I said, we've put a far more emphasis on that now. So we certainly encourage people to call in and make those complaints. And coupled to that, that's our frontline staff that are based out of here, but we also do road policing specific operations as well. So I would expect hopefully your community is observing that there's a lot more checkpoints, for example, now. They're seeing a lot more, dare I say it, people getting tickets now than perhaps where we were 12 months ago. And so interestingly, because Glenda and I go out and do checkpoints as well with the staff, the feedback 99% of the time is really positive. So they do like to see our staff out there doing checkpoints and, checking drunk drivers, but also checking car seats for kids and all that sort of stuff. So we're getting really good positive feedback on that as well.
All right, if we can go back to the list of questions.
So, I think we covered the first one, visibility and response. We've probably covered that off. Response to local businesses and community. We've probably covered that off. We've talked about theft from retailers, etc.
I just had a question around the
Well,
retailer.
can we just park it and just through the list and just
I
hold?
was just saying covenants. I was just thinking if we get to come back to.
Yeah.
Enforcing the bylaws. A couple of people have touched on that.
The window washing
Yes.
bylaw is and so the two that we're thinking of is the alcohol bans. And I have to say, I meant to say this at the beginning actually. The Wilson alcohol ban has worked fantastically. It's been really well enforced. It's as far as we can tell, it's working as it's designed to. But that's different from the New Brighton alcohol ban, which and I know, and I don't, I say this because I think it's useful, not to be critical, but I have heard multiple incidents of police cars driving through the mall where there are people drinking and no enforcement of the liquor ban. And I don't know why that is. That could have been on the ways in somewhere because you can't speed through here, obviously. But that is concerning. And then every day, almost, probably, out of 100 days, and probably about 95 days, there's window cleaners at Eastgate, some of whom we know are dealing drugs. So that bylaw.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first I was aware that we were having issues with the window washers out here again. So again, if that's an issue, Glenda's taken a couple of notes there, we can certainly look to do that. I would have to check with council management, or Glenda can. For example, I know we generally places look to do the enforcement, but has council got a part to play in that? These are questions I don't know.
Council's not responsible.
I'm talking about the window.
Oh, okay, so we keep jumping back and forth, this is a bit confusing. Yeah.
So it's.
I'm not asking you, we'll ask that.
Yeah. So, under the, I guess, generally bylaws, if they're creating an offence, then they're enforced by the police.
Some can be enforced by both council and us. But anyway, that's a conversation with management, not. Okay, community engagement and future plans. We covered. I'll hand to Glenda for that one.
Can we go back to the retail one?
I'm just aware that, I know that I've had some questions, or you've had quite a few questions, and I just want to work through a bit more before we come back to you. Yeah.
Just in relation to the community engagement and future plans, and we're talking about the retail and reassurance of businesses. We talked about evidence-based deployment. However, one of the initiatives for our beat teams, and we've got 3 beat teams, and as I said before, they operate 7 days a week, early and late shifts, or when, depending on what hours of business there are. But each of the teams have got an adopt mall. So they have focused on the larger malls. Now, New Brighton Mall isn't part of that, because that doesn't flag as a high volume of necessary support as such based on the evidence. But this is optimal. We're now almost up to full capacity, fully staffed, our beat teams. We're still got 2 or 3 vacancies that we're holding, but the 3 teams are now up and running, and they're reporting some really good interactions with mall securities and malls generally throughout the city. Future plans for them, we will obviously, the 7-day coverage is there now, and we will be looking at reviewing constantly their deployment. And as I said earlier, we did redeploy them out here to New Brighton when these concerns were raised, maybe at your meeting prior to Christmas. And obviously weren't seen, but they did come out and engage. And I do know that our local community team based at New Brighton has also done walkarounds, and they do regular patrols as well. Obviously not observed by your members, which I can recover that as well. Dedicated community constables for an area to be considered. Well, having a 1-person dedicated, that's really hard, but we've got a beat team that is dedicated to certain areas. That is like having an individual officer, but I guess, but it's not good just to have 1 person being a contact. Obviously, it's better to have a team that are looking after that particular area, and they do. Things that come through 105 or things that are concern and trends, we do pick that up. So if we do see a trend and concerns over something, then our intel services and our analysis will pick up the fact, oh, actually there is a lot of displaced homeless that have all of a sudden moved out here to New Brighton. So we'll actually take that information and look at it and deal with it and work with them to, and social agencies as to why they're there, mental health or outgoing or
that worked really well in Wilson.
Yeah, so, and again, it's us knowing we can't help what we don't, you can't resolve what we don't really know. So that's pretty much that, unless there's anything else you'd like to add.
Just the retail stuff that Celeste was raising.
Yeah, it was just more around, at the moment, I'm not sure if community hear this update, what has changed in terms of improved in this area, because it sounds like the police station is indefinitely closed, pending an active review of that. And in terms of like when we talk about a lot of derelict buildings, I think they did a recent survey. I think there's 88 active businesses that are employing about 400 people. So there is actually quite a big retail footprint. This actually looks smaller than it is because it's a big area, so it's spread out over a large area. So you could argue it's actually one of the bigger retail areas in the city. So it's the city, obviously. So in terms of, what the approach is in terms of addressing some of the concerns for retailers, is there anything we could go back to and say, where there's a contact person, there's this approach? Because at the moment I don't hear anything that they will go, this is positive news for them.
So there's 2 things. I'll still challenge you on the fact we're closing the station. We're not closing the station.
I think we've heard that for a few years.
No, but we're not closing the station. I've literally got 60 or 70 staff based out of that station. So I think we're going to be really careful with our language. We're not shutting the station.
It's a death.
You're not moving into Eastgate either?
I won't give you the exact figure, but I've dropped a lot of money renovating the station in the last 12 months. So we are not shutting the station.
To clarify the point, it would be the front desk being open
Thank
to the
you.
public, yeah.
Okay, so, and we wouldn't have invested all that money doing the reno if we were shutting the station. So, in terms of the retailers, as Glenda touched on, we won't go back to the point where we have an individual officer, for example, tasked as the liaison officer out here. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is it's unfair on that particular officer because they need time off and they can't be taking phone calls 7 days a week. And then the second thing is there's far better opportunity when we've got a pool of people. So the beat team, as part of their deployment, as Glenda said, have adopted certain areas of the city. So whilst they'll patrol the whole city and there'll be different parts of the city they're doing on a daily basis, they're sort of a bit more involved in terms of actually building the relationships with local management, for example, of that particular area. The other point, that's from the beat team's perspective. The other point is we do have, as Glenda touched on, the community teams that are based out of here as well, and they are regularly in and out. walking, buying coffee down at local cafes. We do that ourselves when we come out. Glenda's out here just about every week for a day. I'm out here probably 3 times a month. So, you know, we are out there. I'm hearing that, you know, police isn't out there and that they don't see us. That's interesting. I'd probably like to see some more detail around specifically who is saying that, and then what do we need to do to actually improve that? Because obviously that's their perception and their reality. You know, we've got data that says otherwise, so I'd like to understand why that is. And then we can look to how do we fill that gap.
It'd be great, and perhaps I can suggest we could set up a meeting and we could talk to some of the people that are providing that feedback, because I think that's always the best way to get that information, is actually talk to the retailers that operate it.
That does sound like a really good idea. So
Thank you.
before we go, like, because I know this is something of mutual concern. We had Linwood members had a meeting with Linwood community organisations, plus a few other people about the issues around the Eastgate. And like one of the things that came through is that inside Eastgate is pretty good. It's around Eastgate. But the messages that we were asked to pass on, not just to you, but mainly, I'll just go through them now. First point is that issues have increased in severity and frequency since, and this is our perception, since the Phillipstown Neighbourhood Policing team was redeployed. And the community would like a visible and constant presence and more active community policing, and especially like one officer who's a remit to focus on the Linwood area. Also, there's a desire for more to create more positive connections and visibility with police, especially for young people, and people therefore would be more inclined to reach out to police if they had some more positive engagement. So there's a number of issues around young people, and so that's a concern. And there was particular mention of the window washing bylaw, and there's a desire for the police to attend the quarterly Greater Linwood Forum, which is organised by council. No, it's not organised. Who organises it?
By the Linwood Collective.
It's organised by the Linwood Connection with participation by council. And a question around what is the plan, the strategic plan in terms of, I guess, for addressing these kind of community concerns, and what are the numbers for the? So I don't know about this. This is something that somebody mentioned, that there's public safety teams, and what are the resources that Linwood area is going to get in terms of the public safety teams? Now, I don't know what that is, but somebody mentioned it, so we noted it down.
The public safety team is our frontline staff, so they're part of the big group that's based out in New Brighton, but also the wider city, of course. And we have increased that. We're going to put, I can't talk about specific numbers yet because we're going through a review process at the moment, but our frontline has had more staff from the government. There's another 500, as I've said, which we got a portion of that. And then on top of that, with the review we're doing at the moment, when we look at what's not core business, and then how can we reinvest that. So I can't talk about specifics, but we have increased and we continue, and we will be increasing even further the frontline public safety team. Sorry, I missed the first little bit you were talking about with the Linwood specific. Oh, with Eastgate. Yeah. So
around Eastgate.
Yeah. So look, the B team's actually more visible than, and I'm not being disrespectful for the neighbourhood policing teams because they do a fantastic job. But now that we've got a wider resource with the B team, they are spending more time in Eastgate than what the neighbourhood policing team was.
And what some of the comments have made that the police have made are more felt around in the car park area, and yet it's that intersection that is currently causing the most headaches. But I also like you to comment on that. But the second bit is also, can you just explain what the difference between a neighbourhood policing team and the beat teams is?
So broadly speaking, as the neighbourhood policing team was an initiative we started nationwide. I was in a different role down south than then, but I'm probably going back 10 years. So when I got my role here, Christchurch had 2 of those teams. So I think just briefly, their remit at that time was a specific area. So there'd be a zone, and that was based on a lot of data, socioeconomic crime, et cetera, and essentially their role was to go there for 5 years, work with partner agencies and deal with the meaty social problems that also had an impact on crime and other elements that were measurements. So as time's progressed, there's not that many neighbourhood policing teams left in the country now. In fact, we're probably one of the last ones. Now, if we look at what a beat team does, a beat team uses the similar concept, but they're not tied into a specific geographical area. And dare I say it, it's going back to the future. When we started as young constables, that was your first job for the first 6 months, was actually out on the beat, literally getting to know your local community, retailers, et cetera. And that concept works really, really well. So that's why we've reinstigated it.
But you're also saying that you don't have a geographical area. So how do you get to know your local community if you don't have a geographic area?
Because their role is every day they're out in the community, walking the beat, literally going through doors, literally talking to managers or owners.
I'm not trying to trip you up. I'm really trying to understand this. Is that so? But they could be anywhere in Christchurch.
But there's 3 teams working 7 days a week, and there's a deployment model that we use, and so they are out here all the time. I mean, not 24/7, obviously, but they are out here very regularly.
And how many people in those teams?
18.
And are those teams divided across a wider, like, do you have 3 teams that are assigned for different parts of the city? Or is it just 3 teams that are assigned across this whole city?
So they're on a 7-day roster, earlies and late shifts, and their deployment model is every day. There's a, I'll probably let you answer, but the deployment model is that they'll go to specific areas across the city on a daily basis.
So when we do our deployment, we look at where the need is and where, because the role is about visibility and reassurance. That's their mandate, and that's about being out in the community and being there. So we look at where is the community, where is the numbers, where is the need, where is the crime types that they can actually make a difference by providing reassurance and visible and addressing the volume crime. So Eastgate is a perfect example. I think there's a couple of businesses that are associated with Eastgate, which is the highest reporting in Arua throughout New Zealand. So their targeting of high risk or high offenders and dealing with that problem is showing a decline in that space. But we deploy to the fact that that is a challenge. Our hotspots show that, yes, there is a high reporting there of different types of crime types, not just dishonesty through shoplifting or petrol drive-offs. It's actually a little bit more than that. So they go and that's what they do. But in a month or 2 months' time, Eastgate might fall off, and all of a sudden we might find an increased reporting out here at New Brighton Mall. So we will look at, okay, what is the issues? Is it homelessness, or is it dishonesty, or what is it? So then we'll deploy to that and address that model. Neighbourhood policing teams, they go in and work with the community to enable solutions to, I suppose, to improve the circumstances in that. We're not there to hold their hand all the time. It's actually enabling the community to help address the problems that could be. So that's where the difference is. It's reassurance and visibility. It's really important. And addressing whatever the crimes are highlighted.
Okay, I see a difference now. Joe and then Yanni.
Yeah, thank you. I actually think there has been a wee bit of improvement in New Brighton in the last summer compared to what was going on beforehand, and it's good that there is a bit of a presence. What I want to know about please is we had reports we get quite a few reports about theft of property, and just recently we had the school principals from Avonside and Shirley Boys come to speak to us, and there's quite a few thefts going on at QE2 and at Shirley Boys with bicycles being stolen. Have you got cameras around the neighbourhood that you actually look at, or do you only look at things when they happen?
There are, City Council have crime cameras throughout the city, and there are quite a number. We don't have people monitoring those cameras all the time, because you can imagine the resource required in that. But if there is an offence reported and it is serious, then, or an opportunity for us to utilise that resource, we will. But you've got to look at what the crime type is. If we're talking about low-end theft of a bike, then it's the time trolling through. It was parked there for 4 hours, so who's going to sit and look through 4 hours?
It just seems like it's happening really frequently.
Yeah.
So it could be the same person or group of people doing a lot of them, but that's just an example. But if someone comes to you with the footage, what happens next?
Depends on the quality of the footage, obviously, but if there's an identified suspect or offender, depending on who they are, yeah, we will follow it up. You know, a nominated offender, but if it's just a grainy image of someone, then identifying who that person is, can be challenging. But again, we have got some initiatives in relation to that space, which we probably can't talk about. But bike thefts is on our radar. So
it's just any general theft, like cars or, you know, home contents.
Yeah. And again, we don't know unless it's reported.
Yep.
Right, Yanni, and then Greg, and then Celeste.
Yeah, I was just interested in terms of the beat teams, thanks, you've given us quite a good explanation. So they're not geographically located, but they do spend time in geographic communities. So if we wanted to build a relationship with the community, with the police, thinking of things like the Linwood Collective, you know, the regular meeting, and have a sort of common relationship with, you know, 1 or 2 or maybe 3 people rather than 18 people. I'm trying to understand what the best way to do it is, and I wonder, is there an ability for us to understand who's on the beat team? So if we've got a local issue, got some people in the community that want to meet with the police, instead of, you know, building a new relationship each time, there's kind of a common denominator.
So we have our beat teams obviously report through to a senior sergeant who covers that. He has a number of portfolios like myself. But that relationship, depending on what you want to achieve from those meetings, we would happily, like today, as long as we have notice, make the effort to come. That's not an issue. So we do have a senior sergeant who, as I said, leads the beat teams. That would be good to liaison. But the beat isn't the answer to everything. We've got to also understand around the wider city and what the crimes and the issues are. But unless we know, we can't do anything about it. So yes, we do have a senior who would, which we can talk about afterwards if you want.
And the window watching, my understanding, I've had advice from council. Council staff have said that people should log out under 105, and that the police have been warranted to enforce the bylaw. So.
And the police were what, sorry?
Warranted to enforce.
I accept that, but the question I'll be asking is, and I'm not 100%, so this one I need to check with them, with Mary's team, because my understanding was some of the bylaws, we can have a warrant for it, but also council can do some enforcement as well.
Sure.
Now, I'm not suggesting we just, as in us, would just devolve it back to council, because we both have a part to play in it.
Yeah, totally. So that would be good. And then just the other thing is, if we wanted to establish a community safety panel, one of the strengths I saw in the local policing team was it did bring people together with the intel about what's happening, and then look at what, you know, the community would feed suggestions and to do things, and then hopefully there would be kind of a response. If, you know, the idea of setting up some sort of community safety panel in areas like Eastgate, where we do know it's got a higher percentage of reported crimes, what would be the process around that?
Again, because we have vested interest in Eastgate Mall, then it would be our senior in relation to who leads the beat teams. It's always good to have input and to have a member on those panels or to work with, but we can talk about that afterwards if you like.
Right, we've got Greg and then Celeste and then Tim, and I think the last question will be from Jackie.
With Community Watch, does the police find that a valuable tool? There's an extra set of eyes out there and making a difference?
I'm glad you raised that, because I had that on my list to raise, so thank you. Absolutely, 100%. And we know we've got them across the whole city, and they're an extremely good asset. And we share intelligence with them. Obviously, publicly, legally what we can, but they certainly give a lot of intelligence back for us. And I won't go into detail too much, but I fund quite a bit of that operation as well. And I know we get really good support from, for example, a lot of the car dealerships as well. So yeah, they are a fantastic resource.
Just on that, I meet with the leads of our of that particular group quite regularly, and we have tasked them to look at the Eastgate and Linwood and out here at New Brighton. And during those meetings, we talk about the concerns that the community may have with visibility. So, and they're very good. They're very pro in coming out and being out and about and being our eyes when we can't be.
Yeah, I'm on the community watch and but
Yeah,
you see the information come through, and so it is listed within the organisation to say these places that have been hotspots. Can you increase patrols through those? And even though they might not necessarily be patrolling that area, they do go to those areas additionally to where they were planning on going those days.
And a quick side note to that as well as neighbourhood support, while we're doing the plug, so neighbourhood support's another strong voluntary agency we've got across the country, but also Christchurch. So again, I'd certainly encourage people, if you're not in neighbourhood support, to certainly look at that as another option. And we've got similar relationships with them.
And they've moved to a really cool new model and doing some really good work.
Yep.
Celeste.
I just was interested because I know Aura is a way that obviously you get a lot of your stats with business areas where they actually don't have big retailers that can pay for that system. What I'm wondering is how come those individual retailers having to take on the burden of reporting everything? Because if you're getting a lot of issues, I know, for instance, in some areas, they just press the button that goes through, where others, they're having to take time out of their day, they're already dealing with customers, so it's quite hard to report everything. So I guess my concern is that sometimes the stats themselves is a very blunt instrument in that you don't necessarily capture all the information, and therefore the onus goes back into the community to keep having to pick up the slack, but it doesn't necessarily tell the full story. So how else can we provide information around, like you said, capturing what those local concerns are? So if people are seeing, say, an uptick in a certain type of crime, there is that relationship there that they can, say, look, we're seeing this, we would like a bit more proactive policing in this area at this time. It might be a spike, but what's the best way to do that? Because 105 doesn't feel like it's necessarily the best tool for that.
Yeah, look, I mean, the bottom line is probably like a lot of other businesses, we have to deploy our resources and our priorities based on the data we've got. Now, I'm certainly not going to pretend for 1 minute we don't get under-reporting, because of course we do. If you ask me what is the percentage of under-reporting, I wouldn't know. I could take a guess. So I get it that some people are busy and they'll probably say, oh, police won't do anything because it's a $50 watch or low priority, whatever. But ultimately, if we don't get that information, we don't get the intel data, which means when we're looking at how we resource staff, people or a community may well not get the resource they think they need because their data is not giving that picture. So acknowledging that we've got some issues with the timeliness with 105 in terms of the phone call, that is getting reviewed at the moment. The online is extremely quick, and as Glenda touched on, that's instantaneously. So if someone's typing the job in, it's in their database, within minutes of that person putting the data in. Now, you might not have time on the day because if you're a one-person trader, but when the shop's closed for the night, putting it in then. So then we've got that information. The other point I would make around that is that case that we've just had recently through retail crime, I think it was something like 90 odd charges. A lot of that, if you looked at it as an individual, some people would say, well, that's very low. But cumulatively, 90 charges with X amount of thousands of dollars per day, it's a big picture. So if people aren't reporting it, we don't get that full picture.
Just another, I just noted just before about the drug dealing at one of the other opportunities of things that we can do is Crime Stoppers is a really good tool. So a lot of people are reluctant to report and provide their details in relation to any offending in that line. So Crime Stoppers is anonymous. It creates a police file almost immediately. And again, that analysis is really important when we are looking at drug dealing and targets and suspects and so forth. So I would encourage that as a tool as well to report certain offending. Not necessarily shoplifting, but certainly, but shoplifting as well. They take all sorts of calls, but, yeah.
I was going to suggest that big teams might be a good resource to fill in some of the gaps that is some of that underreporting. So building relationship with a community of retailers and understanding what's going on for them might be a more efficient way of getting that information. Because actually it's building up a better picture from the ground up, which is kind of, to me, has a couple of wins there in terms of building trust and what's happening. We can build that dialogue as well.
Absolutely, and of course, when our beat team's out every day talking to retailers, this is a message you can put down.
The same would apply for, I think, around the Eastgate surrounds, being able to have a meeting just with an officer from the beat team to kind of bring some of that information together.
One quick thing I want to touch on as well is, I'm just going to go through this. There was some recent reporting that 70 calls to police over the last 3 months, reporting the behaviour was worsening, and so police were not responding, no action was taken. So we got our internal analysts to go through that data. Not sure why, but that information wasn't correct, whoever was that out. I'm going to find the number, I think it was 30.
I think 30. There were actually 30 calls for service, and that is, I think it was just over 30, not the 70. And we've actually got a list of all those calls that were made. Obviously, we don't understand how those calls were made or whether it was cut-offs or what it is. But if there is concerns that calls aren't being attended, we understand the perception versus reality. So if a call was made, and entered, and answered and entered, we would know, because there would be a job in the system. Whether it be cancelled or not attended, we could still see it. So, but we have to address the perception. That's that visibility. That's that reassurance in the community, and that's what our beat are hoping to do. Versus the perception of MPTs no longer existing, so they're not providing the service, but actually the service is better because they've got less pressure on them to do the other stuff that they're doing, but focusing on the community and being present and visible.
Right, so a question from Tim and then Jackie, and then we'll be out of time. We're out of time.
Mine's a statement.
Well, that's not a question, Tim.
Well, before time runs out, I've said nothing all day.
Right.
I just want to say thank you to you two for what you do for your jobs and your colleagues. Until the taxpayers pay more money and we can have all the resources everyone would like, which I think won't happen, you're doing a pretty good job of what resources you got. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Jackie, and then if you're lucky,
I am coming back to the window washers at Eastgate, right? Because you're saying, that maybe it's a council thing to sort it. But we have drug dealing going on at that intersection that's a criminal offence. That isn't something for the council to look at. So, they pull up, they give the money to the guy on that side of the intersection, and they go up and do a loop around the road, come back up, and they get whatever it is from the guy on the other side of the road. So it's like, why can that not be addressed? It's like, we know what's going on. People aren't wanting to bring up. I also have people who don't want to ring up and report crime because of fear of repercussion. So it's like we're saying, okay, this is actually happening at Eastgate with these window washers, and we'd like something done about it.
So that's the first. This is the first I've heard of it.
Okay.
So, and that's that catch-22.
Yeah.
We don't know unless they report and have the confidence. And that's where Crime Stoppers is really good, because that's anonymous. Nobody would ever know that it's happening. But now that you've raised it with me, I'll be raising it with our beat team who go to Eastgate to actually maybe spend some time on that corner.
Yeah. We've also got a group that sit at the end of a particular car park, and sometimes they're quite well behaved, but they've got a couple of dogs there, and they harass people regularly when they walk past them. Right? But people don't want to report, and what we're hearing is rather than walk past them and be harassed and ring you guys, they just don't walk that way now. And that to me is unhealthy, is not reporting it.
So probably a couple of quick points for that. So, yeah, I'm certainly not advocating that we walk away from our side of the enforcement in terms of the window washers, but we've got a really good relationship with Mira and her team. So what I'm suggesting there is when we look at bylaws and things like that, that's a partnership, right? Because just as a bylaw is brought up and then automatically that sits with police, well, I've got to prioritise all the other stuff we've got every day as well. So
I just wanted to alert you to the fact that this is not just a bylaw violation, there is crime happening.
Yeah, so that's, as Glenda said, that's first we've heard about the drugs, but, and I get it, some people won't want to put a name to it and ring us up. But Crime Stoppers is totally anonymous and that would never get traced back, so that's one avenue. The other part of it is, yeah, I get what you're saying, go and do something about it, but we need evidence. We can't just go and lock people up. You know, we've got to get evidence around that. And I'm not saying we wouldn't do an operation because we'll go back and do some reviews and assess it. But we also have to look at, can we tie this in with the bylaw? What's the best way to deal with it?
Right, Alex, you get the last one.
I promise it's 10 seconds. Hey, look, we've heard quite a lot that Aurora works quite well, and obviously 105 is quite simple. Is there any way to simplify that process further, or is the stuff that's currently being put into 105 the bare minimum that is needed, I guess, for those reports? Like, I guess Snaps themselves is a good example of what council's done in terms of reporting on council items. Is there something like that we could do that potentially simplifies it, or is that...
You have to call it snitch, send, sold.
And I understand it's may not be a question for you right now, but is that the bare minimum that's needed, or is there a way to simplify that process further?
Well, online 105, and I did it myself, I said a week or so ago, easy, within, boom, I had, and I'm constantly getting emails. And I'm thinking, so it is a good way of reporting stuff and it's in the system and we'll follow up depending on whether there is any lines of inquiry or not, depending on what it is.
And of course, with that system, you know, you can download video footage, photos, everything. So it is a very easy system. And of course, you can do it on your phone, your smartphone as well. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, we'll stick with that.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for your time. I understand that you've got a whole city to take care of, so really appreciate it. I think it'd be great to have a few more conversations about specific issues with some of the members and see if we can try and deal with some of our local issues and find some solutions. So
thank you.
Appreciate it. And if you'd like to join us in our closing karakia, that's the end of our session. Ia tau, tirangi Māori, o tirangi, e tu I honei, o Papatuanuku, e takoto nei, o te tae ao, I awhi nei, kia rua, ia tātou, I hei mauri ora.